We're joined now by Congressman Mike Coffman, who's in town for the ribbon cutting
Right.
of the new VA hospital, which I feel like should have been quite some time ago.
Sure.
We all know that this hospital should have cost a fraction of what it did. What is one thing you would change today, not the cost? What's one thing you would change today before it even opens?
Well, I think some of those changes we've done, particularly we bought on the Army Corps of Engineers late in 2014, effectively that agreement. By the time they fully took over, it was in June of 2015. I think we've also stripped the VA of their ability to manage their own project again. I think it would have been nice if the Army Corps of Engineers would have started with this project from the beginning and not the VA.
Is there anything about the layout, what you finally, the design?
Oh, sure, no, there are design problems that we're going to still have to wrestle with. It was not envisioned to have post-traumatic stress disorder clinic in it. That's going to have to be done at some point. We still have it at the old facility now. There's not enough primary care exam rooms in the new facility, and so we will still have to have some of the staff at the old hospital for a while.
How does that happen? How do you say we need a new hospital and somehow build it without enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. The level of mismanagement, the level of incompetence that is without those being responsible held accountable. I think it's incredible. One thing, I became the new congressman for the district in January 2013, and it didn't smell right. I was getting leaked emails by concerned VA employees that what VA leadership was telling the Congress was not true. And then I just came to the conclusion that these people, the leadership of the VA, can never finish this project. That we have to push them out and bring the Army Corps of Engineers in. And so I'm proud that we got that done. I'm proud that we stripped the VA of their construction management authority to ever build a hospital again on their own.
We've received emails about concerns of mobility before this thing even opens.
Oh, sure.
Here's an example from the wife of a veteran. She wrote, "There's no mention of people movers between the garages and the buildings, and I didn't see how I could push her husband's wheelchair that far without needing oxygen myself." How was mobility for injured, disabled, elderly taken into account with the layout of this place?
The design is so poorly done. And the fact is, this is double the square footage with the same number of beds, and even not the equivalent space in terms of dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and dealing with primary care exam rooms. I mean, it is a very bad design. You might get a visa, I think, for somebody moving from inpatient to just get an x-ray.
How do you get someone from the garage to the building if they are in a wheelchair, if they're elderly? Are we solving that problem, or are we just living with this is a bad design?
No, the VA is looking at mobility issues like the equivalent of having golf carts that are electric motors move people within the facility.
Is that going to be an ongoing cost that we didn't anticipate?
It will be an operational cost that I doubt that was anticipated when they organized the plan for the hospital. Again, my involvement really when I became the congressman was January 2013. I'm not as familiar with what occurred prior to that.
What's the timeline for getting rid of the old VA?
Well, now because of the fact that the PTSD is there's not enough primary care exam rooms in the new hospital to accommodate the entire staff in the old hospital, that I suspect it could be 3 to 5 years that the first floor of the old hospital will be open until, probably for the PTSD thing is probably not so hard, I think, to lease a space for that. For the primary care part, I think what the VA wants to do, and we'll take a look at this, is probably lease an outpatient clinic somewhere in the metropolitan area to accommodate those. And so actually that could be a lot less in terms of time versus building an outpatient clinic.
Let me get this straight. We've built a new house. We're keeping our old house, and we're leasing space in another house.
We're keeping space in the other house, and to compound insult to injury, the same that an individual will be there tomorrow, Stella Fiotis, who's the director of construction and facilities management for the VA, who was director of construction and facilities management for the VA in 2013 when these problems were identified. And so it is amazing that she is still there. And what that speaks to is, and I'm going to have a sit down with the new secretary and say, not only her, but you've got to look across the board at these people at the senior executive service level, where there are documented reports of failures that have never really been corrected with the same people there. And you've got to clean house with these people. And if you don't do that, no matter what you say or do on behalf of this president, you will not change the culture of bureaucratic incompetence at the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Last question on the VA. How does that move work? Do the lights turn off in most of the floors of the old VA one night and then turn on at the new VA?
Well, it's a rolling move, and that's why it's timed in essentially two different tranches, outpatient and inpatient. The outpatient being the 28th. There's going to be a lot of the equipment is going to be new, state-of-the-art equipment, and then inpatient on the 4th of August.
Okay. On Twitter earlier this week, you posted this. Putin's Russia isn't our friend, won't be an ally, and most certainly won't stop their rogue behavior against our country, our allies, and our interests. As I've said in the past, President Trump should never take Putin's word at face value and should give greater consideration to U.S. intelligence agencies over the Kremlin's rhetoric. Will you want to meet with Vladimir Putin if he comes to Washington, D.C.?
No, and nor do I think the president should meet with Putin. And particularly the president should be meeting with Putin alone. The president has a very good national security team around him, with our Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Advisor. The president should never, ever meet with Putin alone, first of all. And I think the president underestimates that, dramatically underestimates, to the extent that Russia is a threat to the national security interests of the United States. And so I think weakness invites aggression. And what I think that the president, the image that the president, in my view, presented in Helsinki was one of weakness. And so I think it's the wrong direction for the country.
Does that mean you don't believe the president when he says he misspoke?
Oh, I don't know. The president could, if he misspoke, I think that's a good thing. That he didn't intend to say what we thought he said. But look, I think that there was a bipartisan reaction to the president's meeting with Putin that was negative. And I think that the White House got that message.
Have you met with President Trump face-to-face, or how many times since he's been president?
No, I've been in meetings, several meetings with the president since he's been inaugurated.
Will you tell this to him the next time you see him, that you don't think he should meet with Putin alone anymore?
I think that absolutely, if I have the opportunity to talk to him, I would certainly say that. But it goes beyond that, whether or not he meets with Putin. I mean, I'm not as concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is that we have a disconnect between the actions of the administration and the rhetoric of the administration. The actions of the administration are pretty good vis-a-vis Russia. That we are building up our military, that we are working with our NATO allies, that we're pushing them to do at least 2% of their economy towards defenses they committed to do. So we've got sanctions going on Russia. We're helping the Ukrainians by supplying them with weapons to counter Russian aggression in Ukraine. We're doing a lot of things right from that point of view. It's the rhetoric that concerns me coming out of the president.
Regardless of who becomes the next Supreme Court justice, do you think if it comes in front of the court that it should reconsider Roe versus Wade?
I think I'm going to leave that to the court. I think Kavanaugh has said that it's settled law, and so I'll just leave it there.
How come you don't want to take a position on it? Because it's an election year?
Well, I'm certainly pro-life. I don't think there's a question about that. You know, and I think that it ought to be something that states decide. But I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so I'm going to leave that to them.
Speaking of an election year, this week you became the first Republican to call for a vote for net neutrality, to bring back the everyone has the same fair shake as to the speed of what we get online. Do you care about net neutrality, or is this an issue that you think will appeal to moderates being an election
Well,
year?
I introduced the issue of net neutrality quite some time ago, before the FCC had made their decision to repeal the net neutrality rule, to repeal Title II. And so, and said that this is an issue that an unelected body, the FCC, these commissioners, should not be making. That this is so foundational to our economy and to our First Amendment right that it ought to be decided by the Congress of the United States. So what I did was introduce legislation, certainly as well as sign on to a discharge petition to force a vote on repealing the FCC rule, which would restore net neutrality. But what my legislation does is it provides a lot of ground rules for the internet service providers: no throttling, no blocking of content, no paid prioritization, and transparency in terms of allowing consumers to know what they're doing.
Representative Mike Coffman, thanks for joining us. Do me one favor. When you go to the VA ribbon cutting, can you make sure that the scissors being used were brought from someone's home and didn't cost taxpayers $600?
I will make sure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.